Well, hey guys, what's up? This is Christina Riley and Angela Jean, and we are here at Caffeinated Inspiration. We're doing a home edition due to social distancing. Instead of drinking coffee, we both opted for teas today. Our topic is fear. The last time that you and me were together, you said a statement that really caught my interest because I had never heard anything like that before. You mentioned that you had to break up with yourself, that you had to divorce yourself.
So it relates directly to fear because the bottom line is I discovered a lot of things about myself that was rooted in fear that was kind of hidden, but it kept me from moving forward. So in December 2019, I had surgery, and the surgery was so impactful that afterwards I was no longer on high blood pressure medicine. I could think clearly, just all kinds of things as a result of getting rid of an issue that I had for over 12 years, but it just progressively grew worse. And I never got any type of help for it. I was in pain. And so after my surgery in December, January came and I started to heal. It's like, okay, I wonder how this new life is going to be because I didn't know anything separate from pain. It kind of becomes a part of you to the point where you deal with it so much that you just know you got to get up and go, or you got to get up and work, or get up and do things with your kids. I got to the point by December, I couldn't get up and do nothing. When January came and I started to heal, God started talking to me about this new person that I was becoming, because I didn't have the opportunity to not have any thoughts or feelings pertaining to you saying, let's go out to eat. It probably would have stopped me in my tracks because I was so overwhelmed with pain that I was not even putting a voice to anymore. It was just what I was dealing with. And it became a me issue to me getting out the house. Like anything else didn't matter. Like after a while, I just started behaving oddly, because I was really struggling with myself. And after I started healing in January, February, March came, and I realized, man, like, I feel renewed through and through. Then I started visiting my old thought process, just because there were some things that I knew I was fearful of, but now that I'm putting it all out and trying to attack it, I had to go back and visit some things and deal with it. And that's a very scary place to be.
Yeah.
And it gets to the point where your emotions and feelings that you are so attached to come out when you're really trying to change, really trying to be sincere with yourself. You start realizing what was in you. What were you really thinking? Why did you make this decision? And I had to go back through all my decisions. I'm very big on decisions, deciding wealth. And so, and I don't mean monetary value. I mean just the wealth of you, your decisions. So I had to go back and visit my decisions to have 2 kids out of wedlock. It wasn't a flat, it wasn't a decision that had a lot of thought to it, but it had a lot of thought from it that had to come from out of nowhere. Like I had never thought about even taking care of a child. I didn't even babysit. But I had to go back and I had to visit those points where I felt lonely, felt like I didn't know what I was doing, felt like I still had to go on and really didn't deal with self. And so I had to go back and divorce that 19-year-old girl that had a baby. I had to go back and divorce words. I had to go back and divorce, nouns and pronouns, people, places, and things, because it was obvious now. Now that I was feeling better, things became clear. Like, oh, you're more of a problem to yourself than anybody ever could be. So let's go back and visit relationships. Let's go back and visit, everything. So now that I'm here and we had to go through a whole crisis, I actually was doing okay because God had dealt with me enough to understand that I have to go to my prayer closet, period. I was automatic, in gear, but nobody could expect what came out of this time period enough to even prevent any emotions that come from it or whatever. But this time, me going through emotions or dealing with stress was so different because I had surrendered my thought process. I didn't have to go back and question myself. I got a chance to understand the answers immediately because God had been working on me in those areas of being pressed.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do? You prayed. You're on your face. Matter of fact, you were toe up. Remember that time and remember what I was speaking to you then. And at the end of the day, the only thing I can remember God speaking to me in any situation I've been in, whether, it was my son being diagnosed with cancer at 1, which is my youngest son or whatever, God was still whispering love songs to me, like literally. And even now, it seems like he's immediately meeting me at my need instead of it being, it's been some long suffering, but instead of it taking forever because I trust him and believe him like nobody's business, he's like, I'll show it to you. I'll prove you, I'll prove it to you. I'll prove my work is real to you. And he's just been showing up every single day, so different and so beautiful. And even when it's difficult, I have friends like Christina that I can reach out to, and it's important because after a while, you don't want to reach out no more. You kind of almost want to give up and, succumb to it. But I'm learning to speak up, no matter how embarrassing it is, no matter how transparent I have to be. So what? You'll get over it. This is what's going on because I want to keep being renewed. I don't want that no more. I don't want to keep it and become toxic.
That's awesome. So one thing that you just mentioned, I had a question for you. You said that you had to surrender your thought processes. How did you do that?
Well, I had to, like I said, research my own way of thinking and what is that and how do you respond to conflict? How do you respond to being overwhelmed? How do you respond to all these different things? What's your thought process in that? And can you respond a little better? Can you respond a little quicker? Don't you understand? You know what I mean? Just realizing what information I do have when I feel like I don't have a lot of information about myself. Mm-hmm. What do you know? Well, I know God is faithful. So I'm picking up on those characteristics and habits to try to correct and corral myself, so I can be a blessing to other people. Because if you don't know how to surrender, you're not going to be filled. Mm-hmm. And it's a filled to capacity overflow fill. It's not like a normal being filled up. Mm-hmm. And that means you're always letting things go, period. Mm-hmm. Learning how to let yourself go over and over and over again.
One thing that really stood out to me while you were talking is it sounds like in correlation to surrendering your thoughts and your thought processes, it sounds like part of that is reminding yourself of God's faithfulness, reminding yourself of things that you do know, because you mentioned that you kept going back. Well, I don't know this, but I do know this. God is faithful. Mm-hmm. And so in that, where you're reminding yourself of God's faithfulness I think, I can really relate to that because there's so much that happens just in life period that can really throw a person, like flip the person upside down, where they feel like I'm done. That process of remembering what God has, remembering what you do know, like instead of the things that you don't know, because there's so many things that happen that we don't have control over, or that if we sit down, and just ask ourselves, well, I don't know this, I need to know this answer, and then you don't get that answer. Why did this happen? Why did this happen to my sister? Or why did this happen to me? Or why did this happen to my child? Not getting those answers can really rattle somebody and really disrupt the inside, I think. And I think everybody can relate to that feeling of not being in control and not knowing the answer, the unknown. There's so much of that right now where we just don't know. And it is unsettling, and it is disturbing, and it can provoke fear. And I feel like if we focus on that, where, well, I don't know this, I don't understand why this, and if we focus on that, I think that really is a bad habitat. It's a habitat to grow and birth fear. I've experienced that myself, and that's why I say that, because I've been there where I've had an issue where I do not know the answer, and it's troubling my heart. And I even go to prayer, or I'll self-reflect on something, and then I try to figure it out myself. Or the lack of response from God and my own timing. I would go to presumptions where, well, if God didn't say this, then, oh, he might be mad at me, or, oh, I really messed up, or just different. It can go into a trail where we beat ourselves up out of that fear, that root of fear. And then you have the whole other layer where you beat yourself up, and then the enemy comes in and beats you up more. To try to weaken your strength that God gives us. But I really like what you said. You had to surrender your thought processes to God. Part of that surrendering was really you choosing to trust God, is what it seems. And to help promote that atmosphere, that environment of trusting God versus that atmosphere, that environment of building and growing like this fear tree, these deep roots of fear. Instead of that, you shifted over here into those roots of trust by reminding yourself of God's faithfulness and reminding yourself, well, I don't know this, and that's okay, because I do know this. And there's a scripture that God gave me in one of my last podcasts, but it reminds me of what we're talking about, because it talks about we might never know the answer, but we just need to trust God. And I think, I had one person ask me once, an old high school friend of mine, she was going through some troubling situation at the time, and I hadn't seen her for 10 years, and we met up, and she was very troubled, and she came to me and she told me, well, Christina, I don't know how to trust God.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people out there that does not understand, that has that same feeling. Well, how do I trust God? How do I trust God? Because, with people, there's this saying of, oh, well, you have to earn my trust. You have to, the trust has to be earned, and I think there's that mentality of, well, God has to earn it. But really, that's the wrong way of thinking. That's the wrong mindset, But at the same time, even if he had to earn it, but he doesn't have to earn it. But even if he had to earn it, he already earned it whenever he loved us by sacrificing his own son while we were still sinners. And so if that can be one thing, if that's the only thing is that Jesus died on the cross for my sins, if that's the only thing that to be true, and then you're faced with all this like turmoil, just go back to that one thing and then submit those other things. Yeah, and then submit those other things that you don't understand and trust in God's timing. And then I think we have to come to this point where we have to be okay with not having the answer, with not hearing back from God of, well, I need to know this answer. I think that's where we get hung up on a lot. I know I have.
Mm-hmm.
But I see that I can really relate to what you're saying with that. And I can see some other workings in there that's interesting. And even as we're talking, like some of that I didn't even realize until we started talking, and it just really helped me to notice some things that I didn't really see before.
Yeah, I think it works like that double-edged sword, because there's a lot of times that what I'm understanding, I'm just like, wow, had I got that understanding, that would have prevented a whole lot. So let me be sure to mention this, you know what I mean? Because for me, it was life-saving to understand where I stood with God. It wasn't where I stood with my kids, my parents, anybody else. It was just understanding that he didn't expect me to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So why am I trying to catch up with perfection?
Yeah.
So since it's not merit-based, why am I trying to act like I have to earn it? Because he freely gave it. Why am I acting like he has to earn it? Like you just said, he adored me from the beginning. So it never changed. And so I think a lot of things that we do is coming back and trying to change his view. And his view doesn't change whatsoever. And so when I started breaking down everything, the scriptures I do know, faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God, he would start breaking that down to me and showing me, okay, Angela, you have to hear it in order to see it.
Mm.
So, okay. And then even more so, faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God. Hearing is actually putting out that understanding of what it's like, part of the waves to draw the picture. So those sound waves to draw the vision, and how you interpret it allows you to go towards the vision, because it's being drawn out as you're walking. You don't know what the whole vision is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where, thy word is a lamp into thy feet,
Yeah.
and light into thy path comes in, because you're really, really dependent on the person who created you to show you what he wants you to do, which just so happens to line up with what you have in your heart, because it just so happens that he put it there. So why not give it back to him? Say, here, show me what to do with this. You gave it to me. What you want me to do with it? Because everything I did with my heart, I was breaking it, my own heart, and didn't realize that when you're doing that, you're setting yourself up for false expectations and disappointment, because you're going after the wrong source to fix it. God is the source.
Mm-hmm. While you were talking, I kind of saw like a little movie in my head.
Yeah.
The story about Joseph in the Bible.
Yes.
How,
Yes.
he had a dream, and he had a dream from God, and it was a good dream. And then after that good dream from God, after God spoke to him and told him, hey, this is going to be something that's important, that's going to happen in your life. Joseph didn't understand the dream at the time. And but God already knew what was going to happen. But there was that season in his life, like after he got that anointing, or after he got that word from God, after he got that vision, then the attacks started happening, one after another, and it looked like there was just chaos in his life, and God wasn't there, but he was there the whole time. He was there when his brothers plotted to kill him. He was there when his brother sold him into slavery, when he was dragged into a completely separate country and became a slave. He was there when he was accused of trying to attack one of his masters. God was there when he was put into prison And out of all of that, he didn't do anything wrong. And going back to my friend that I mentioned before, another thing that she told me was that she was concerned that, you know, when you see things like that happen, that are obviously bad things, you know, and it makes no sense, that, you know, she was concerned that that God's not in there, that he left her, that he is not present anymore. And I don't know if Joseph ever struggled with that feeling of, well, God, did you abandon me? You told me this thing, you gave me this beautiful vision, and now look at all this horrible stuff that happened to me. There's no way that you're here with me now. I don't even know how long of a time span that was, but that was like several years that went by that he was just having a horrible life. You know?
Yeah.
You know, we think we got it bad. Man, he had it horrible.
Yeah.
But you know, there's a scripture that talked about while he was in prison, his soul entered into that iron that was binding him, you know, holding him, and that he became so strong. And so I think during those troubling seasons, you know, it's not fun at all. However, God always has a purpose for the pain, and he always has a purpose for it doesn't matter how far gone you think you are, how far you think you've missed it. He's not surprised, and he's not surprised, and he hasn't left you, and it might look like he has, but he hasn't. And through that, it reminds me, because, you know, last night I found an old binder of mine from like when I was in college, and then there was some old paper in the back from when I was like a teenager, and I don't even know how that got in there. So I started looking at it, and it was some notes that I took, and I took a picture. But I thought it was interesting because it was some stuff that I forgot about. But so it's, you know, just some notes. But
yes.
in Isaiah 59:19, and it's like it breaks down some lessons in that verse. But what I thought was really interesting, it's a statement. It says, breakdown and breakups precedes breakthroughs. And so I thought that was so interesting because, you know, we're talking about breaking up with yourself, breaking up with fear, breaking up with that root of fear that's in everybody. And, you know, this biblical principle tells us that breakdowns, you know, Joseph, that was a breakdown in his life. If I don't know anything, that's a breakdown. And then breakups precedes breakthroughs. And so when you look at all of that, man, that's powerful. Obviously I've heard of this, you know, years ago, but I forgot about it. But man, that's powerful. You know, breakdown.
And you found it in your notebook.
Yeah, I found it in my notebook. You know, I don't even know why I was looking through it. I just picked up my old notebook, and I was like, I wonder what's in here. But, you know, several months, if you look at the process of that, you know, this is what we're talking about. It's such a God thing, orchestrated, that I had no control over. You know, that notebook, it's amazing that it's still around, to be honest. It's amazing the papers are still there. But it's even more amazing the location where it was in the process of me picking it up and reading it before I went to bed. I had it right by my nightstand, and I just noticed it, and I just reached for it, and I don't even know why I did, but I was like, I'm just gonna look in here, why not? And as I was looking in there, it just these things popped out to me, and shortly after that, I got attacked by the enemy with fear. And I'm like, okay, God, this is a spiritual attack. This is a spiritual battle. There's things I don't really understand what's going on right now, but I trust you. And I just think it's so interesting, how everything is kind of coming together at the right timing.
I just can't believe it, because it's like, it could have been anything else going on but a pandemic in this world.
Yeah.
And so to be able to look at that right now,
Mm-hmm.
much more does that mean? How golden is that?
Yeah. I agree. There was you mentioned kind of holding on to those things that you know. Well, one of those things that I know, because I've lived it, I've seen it, and I just know, is it wraps up kind of in what we're talking about, is that whenever the enemy comes against you,
Mm-hmm.
right around the corner, he always attacks the hardest right before a breakthrough. And when you look at the pandemic, going around, like, my goodness, what good things are coming our ways? Like, what blessings does God have for us right now in this season in our lives? Like, with all of this stuff going on, it's easy to it's easy to stay in a habitat of fear, because it's surrounding. It feels like it's everywhere. It feels like we're kind of in this ocean of fear, but when you look at that scripture that I found, actually, it was, attached to this. I'm going to pull it up real quick. When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard against him. It feels like we're in a flood of fear. But the truth is that, when the enemy comes in like a flood, like obviously he has, that God will push him out. God will prevail through all of this negativity. And I think, standing on things like that, remembering, like, okay, the word of God is true. I just have to hold on to that, I think is really important.
I agree. You don't have anything else. It's like, right now is you either believe him or you don't.
Yeah.
Either you're going forward or you're going to stay still and regress.
Yeah.
Are you going to actually see if his word is still true? Are you going to still dream? Are you going to still grow? And you have to want to as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some pretty tough things that God requires, but that's how he operates, period. Mm-hmm. And so there's no room for, still being on the fence for him, because he's trying to not only get you across the river or, through the sea, but he's also trying to affect the destinies that come behind you. Mm-hmm. So if you're accepting freedom with God and you're walking with him, the enemy acts like, have you seen the movie Set It Off?
What movie?
Set It Off.
No, I haven't.
It's an older movie, but with Queen Latifah and a couple other people. But at the end of the movie, I think they were robbing some places. At the end of the movie, when the police came and they were going to get caught, the one character, which was actually played by Queen Latifah, was like not ready to go out without a fight. And because she was ready to go, she she started the car and she had her guns blazing and she went towards the police. Like, she knew she was going to die, but she's going to go out a certain way.
Yeah.
And the devil knows that he's at a limited time. He has limited time. And so to me, that's what he's acting like. Like, I'm going to go out blazing, I'm going to do everything I can before the end.
Yep.
And you got to be constantly ready, but the word stands before you. He stands beside you and surrounds you. And so if you understand that and you're actually walking in it, you're a threat to any type of virus, any type of enemy that comes up against you, that puts up the flood mentality. But God's there. His standard is, thy word is a lamp unto thy feet. His standard is, I'm with you. Yea, though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death. He's there. And he's close to the brokenhearted. So anytime I'm feeling brokenhearted, I know he's here. I know for a fact, because he said it. Now, I've always heard it, but it wasn't until I actually needed it that I accepted it. Like, he's close, because the world will kind of point, even if it's based on religion, period, it'll paint a picture as if you're not acceptable, just hurting. Not just as you are, but hurting. Not many people want to accept hurting people, because it's a wild card, but God has a solution. He has a plan, even if this comes up,
Mm-hmm.
And I just go back to the source. I go back to the hub. I go back to my connection, because I don't know what to do with every single situation. So moving past that, I just added it to how I process. So now it changed my thought life to reflect his thought process.
Mm.
I'm going to keep moving forward. So if you put up those guards, it shows you a direction that you might not have had before.
Mm-hmm.
And understood that direction is okay.
Mm-hmm.
God gives us clues all the time, but we don't always understand that it's for our good. Immediately, when something is going crazy, I kind of understand, like, okay, get still. Listen. Just listen more. Be quiet.
You're reshaping your thought processes from your own to God thought processes. So for somebody that doesn't really understand that or how to do that, I know that's a loaded question, but
It's okay.
Could think about that. But also, I want you to, you have some experience with mental health and wellness, and I want you to kind of talk a little bit about that as well, if you don't mind.
Sure. I'm a behavioral health case manager too. And basically, just the liaison in between the therapist and the person getting the types of resources and help that they need.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it because I'm in school to be a rehabilitation therapist, LPC track. But I wanted to know everything from every perspective, because a lot of times access to care is everything. And I don't know all the programs that are out there. So I kind of got to get a view from the perspective of somebody that's actually needing services. Well, how does that feel? How do they need to really go about saying, I need help, when I can't even say I need help most of the time? How do I expect somebody else to do it? Yeah, I have these resources, but it really, at the end of the day, takes the person wanting to help. And it takes the people helping from a perspective of a strengthening help them to help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It sharpens them. It doesn't wear you out. And those are some of the models I keep with me. So it's called a strengths-based model, but it saved my life because I'm always doing something to help. But sometimes God wants people to be able to fish on their own. And so I become an enabler at that point. So God puts up all these standards and we kind of blow past them because we're not really paying attention to his behavior and how he does things and how he operates. We're going off of how we feel like we should operate. But the people who are needing help need somebody to understand that it's going to come any type of way. They're not like the perfect patient, they're not just, perfectly awaiting just a perfect situation for help. They're at the point where they're dying. And it doesn't matter if it's physically, mentally, or spiritually, they're dying. So it's urgent. And you have to triage it for them. But you also got to know how to triage things for yourself, because you can't be a hurting person helping somebody that's hurting. You'll never see it. You'll be in the way. Again, another reason to divorce self.
What are some ways that you could recommend to somebody how you divorce self, or how can they divorce self?
I had to get to the point of understanding the full context of, and you'll never really understand the full, but just a little bit of my layers. Getting to know yourself as a person, not just a mother, not just a sister, not just a daughter. Getting to know yourself, that means you and God, relationship, every day, as you are. You could be so jacked up, so what? He loves you as you are. I'm jacked up. Let me come to God as I am, lay down everything, and we just do this every day. Let's practice this every day because I need you. I got to the point where I got sick of myself. I got sick of Angela. So I was like, I started talking to Angela. Like it was another person. Like, look, I am tired of you because you won't go and just do. I didn't want to be the one holding myself back from just doing, just going, but I was. I couldn't blame that on anybody else. I could sit there and talk about every situation I've ever been through, but that wasn't predicated. That wasn't the only thing predicating my decisions.
Mm-hmm.
It was me too. So what self don't jive here? What about self is not operating the way that I'm supposed to operate? Then on top of that, I had a high expectation level from other people. They couldn't see that I was hurting because I was still functional. So it's just as bad as being a functional alcoholic because you're still dying on the inside.
Yeah.
But you're trying to cope with everybody else and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's to the point where I was no longer willing to hold on to myself. There was nothing I was gaining. So I decided to surrender as an understanding that surrendering to self is much more than a sacrifice. It's life-saving.
Yeah.
Period.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. While you're talking, I started remembering a season in my life that was not too far away, but where I felt like I kind of did the same thing. I didn't even realize until you were talking, but it was a layer of divorcing self, and what it was. I never made my bed. Okay, and growing up, I never made my bed. When I was a kid, I never made my bed. And I had an aunt, she was my great aunt Margie. And every time she'd come over to our house when I was growing up, she'd always, get onto the kids like, you need to make your bed. And I didn't even realize, but I had this root of rebellion against making my bed. And I never would make my bed. And even when she would come over, she'd make it, and she'd make it really beautiful. But she just had this standard of always making your bed every morning, no matter what. And I never really, she's passed away since all of this, but I never really appreciated that back then. And, years go by, habits form. I came from that standard of, I knew what was right, and I wouldn't do it. And it created this environment that was sloppy, and this environment that was messy.
Yeah.
And that I didn't even realize it, but it made me feel bad about myself. And I didn't even realize it until later. And I was listening to this audio book by Terry Savelle Foy. She's Jerry Savelle's daughter. And the book's called Decluttering Your Way to Success. And she was talking about how she went on this journey to decluttering her life from a biblical standpoint and a point of view at a time when her marriage was on the verge of a divorce, and she was completely flat out broke and just all this stuff. And then God's answer, she mentioned that she was praying, God, change my husband. And the answer God gave her was, do the dishes, make your bed. But what was interesting was I started doing that, and it changed her life in the book. But it really impacted me when I started making these changes in my life. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try this. I'm going to give myself a challenge. I'm going to make my bed for 62 days in a row, and let's see if I can do this. And I have struggled with I struggled with self, because I would wake up, and what happened, like I was so determined, I wanted to do this. And then as soon as I woke up, I just had this dialogue with myself, like convincing myself, oh, I'll start tomorrow, or I'm not going to do it today. It's not that important. I'll do it later. And then what I noticed was I wasn't doing it. And I thought, well, I'm getting in my own way. I want to try this. Why is it so difficult? Why am I holding myself back from this change I want to happen in my life? And so one day it kind of clicked for me, and I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to do it. And I even remember having this argument with myself internally of, oh, I don't have time to do this. I'm a busy person. That's going to take 20 minutes. I don't have time. I got to do this. I got to do that. And I got to have time to make my coffee before I go. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do this. And so I actually set a timer on my phone to see how long it would take to act for ulterior motives. I was going to show myself it wasn't worth it. It took too long. And I discovered by timing myself, it literally took me 2 minutes to make my bed. And that was like a big aha moment for me, because I thought, wow, I have self-sabotaged for so many years over a simple 2-minute thing. I've wasted so much time of my life dreading making my bed, not making my bed, and convincing myself that it's not worth it to make the bed, when it only takes 2 minutes of my day, my morning, to make my bed. And then the benefits that come from that is when I go or I walk past my room or I go into my room, it's just pleasant and it's got a peaceful atmosphere, and it just and it promotes this feeling of something good for yourself. It's like taking care of yourself in a way. And I didn't really appreciate it and understand it until I got older, and I just tried. I just thought, I'm going to do this. And I had to confront that ugliness about me, that why am I procrastinating? Why won't I finish something that I start? Why am I arguing to myself about, why am I making excuses because of the way I feel? And I remember the early stage of me going through making my bed, I felt sluggish. I felt, like the whole time I was doing it, I literally felt like it was torture. Like, I don't want to do, I felt like my mom was like, I felt like it was like a punishment, but I'm like, I'm punishing myself.
Yeah.
I felt, and I tell you, after that 2-minute punishment, whatever, all of a sudden that icky feeling went away, and I felt really accomplished about myself. And what happened was, as I did that every single day, as I wouldn't stop, no matter how I felt, I wouldn't stop. And I did it. And I did it for a year. I did it longer than a year. And what happened is I learned that I can trust myself. It taught me in that I'm dependable in this area. I can trust myself in this area. I'm dependable. I grew a layer of respect for myself in that area. And where, I think I didn't even realize before I disrespected myself because I didn't even realize that was there until I learned to respect myself by finishing what I started, by taking care of the things that I have better, by being a better steward over certain things. And it taught me, just by making my bed, how to love myself in a different way, how to respect myself, how to care for myself better, and how to honor God in a little bitty way. You know, and also at the same time, and just the added cherry on top, you know, it creates this tangible environment of a peaceful oasis in a certain space. And, you know, it's a little thing, but it really, making my bed actually changed my life in a good direction. And if you would have asked me you know, talk to me when I was a teenager, or even when I was like in my 20s, you know, you would talk to me, I would have, and, you know, told me the story, I would be like, that's not for me. You know, you can tell it all you want, but I'm not going to do that. You know, I'm content with being the way it is. What's the point? I used to tell myself, what's the point in making your bed when you're going to get back into it that night? There's no point in fixing the covers. Well, I watched this video from this drill sergeant. I don't remember what his actual title was, but it was on YouTube, and actually she referenced it in the book. And that's the first thing that they teach you in military school, is how to make your bed the right way. Out of all this stuff, everything, the first thing they teach them is how to make their bed, how to make their bed excellent and perfect. And if you watch the way they make the bed, it's not even near, like it's like insanely perfect to the measurement and the tightness, you know? And if you really think about it, like, how odd is that? Because, like, they're not going to need to make their bed when they go to war. They're not going to need to make their bed when they're in negotiations with a terrorist or whatever. You know, they're not going to need that. What is that? What's the point of that? Why would they make that the mandatory first stepping stone foundation in a career that's a career field that is so important? And one thing that he talked about was that it teaches you to be good, to do your best in the little things, to be a good steward, and to look for whatever you touch, to excel at it on purpose. Don't be lazy. Don't do things the quick and fast way just because it's easier. You know, if you're working on something, there's like a screw loose, tighten that one screw. You don't have to. I heard, I was listening to Joel Osteen on Sirius XM the other day, and he told a story about, there was this painter, and he was hired to paint this woman's boat red, and he was painting her boat, and while he was painting it, he noticed that there was a small hole in the bottom of the boat, and it wasn't his job to patch that hole, but he decided to patch it because he wanted to do it excellently with whatever with his project. And so he just made that decision to patch that hole. And what happened was that, you know, the woman that contracted him, she even knew there was a hole in that boat, you know, and she was going to fix it herself. She was going to fix it later. So he didn't even need to do it. It wasn't his job. He didn't get paid for it. He didn't get credit for it. But what ended up happening was her two little boys got in that boat without their mom's permission, and they took it really deep. And they don't know how to swim, and they would have drowned if he didn't patch that hole. She was panicked, and she thought that, oh my gosh, did they drown? There was a hole in that boat that I've been putting off fixing it, and I don't have any control over this. And then they came back in the midst of her being afraid, and then she was like, and she looked for the hole. So she ended up going back to that painter and said, I know you've patched this hole for me, and I want to tell you, you saved my two kids' lives by patching that hole. So I just wanted to thank you for doing an excellent job and going above and beyond, because that little thing that you did, it saved my kids' lives. And when I heard that story, I thought, wow, that's pretty darn incredible. And that was a true story. That's not that's not a fabricated story. And I just thought, my goodness, when we make the choice to do something excellently, we can really, you have no idea what can happen from it. It benefits you, but you don't know how it's going to reach other people by you making a decision to go above and beyond or with something,
Yes. I love that. I love that story for so many reasons, because it takes a work of a lot of different people on obedience to get to what God has for you sometimes too. So if I'm not being obedient, that might affect who God wants to bless, because I'm not being obedient. And it might be I have some things going on, but it's important to be able to be aware enough to know God's character, which he has a character of excellence and beyond. And you mimic some part of what God has put in our understanding and how he shows us seed time and harvest. It's not that it had to be perfect, but it has to be a perfect season for it. It has to be the perfect soil for it. It has to be other components to allow it to grow. And I think a lot of times we don't want to even have anybody else involved in our growth and development because it looks so jacked up. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important to be like, I'm here. I need help here. Mm-hmm. And getting to that point where you can be of service to others and have a spirit of excellence. But if you never fix it in those places, what you do greatly impacts somebody else, or what you don't do.
Yeah.
Basically.
And it even trickle effects for yourself too into other good things. Like what ended up happening with me is it started with my bed. It started with making that decision. I want to see if this will do something for my life, and I became consistent with it. And then I realized this is only 2 minutes of my day. That's literally 2 minutes of my day. And it makes me so happy to have my bed made. What else can I add to my day? And things that I thought before was, impossible with my schedule. I'd always make this excuse. I'm too busy to do this, to do that. I'm too busy. I don't have time to do the dishes before I go to bed. I don't have time for that. I'm a busy person. But it was just an excuse. And so I started adding different routines and like in stages and phases, not really like all at once. I discovered, if you try to do everything, like, sometimes we have good intentions to change our life for the better. And we can actually really harm ourselves sometimes by having those good intentions and then getting on this really high, because I've done that. And then when you get on this really high of like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to, be better with this, I'm going to be better with this, and I'm just going to be this awesome person, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to inspire myself. And then when you fail at that, it's like this high went to like, whoa, or this huge low of, I don't know if I can trust myself, or I can't depend on myself. I want to do this, but I failed, or I want to do this and I couldn't do it. And what I discovered is that, in phases, there's like seasons in life, there's seasons in everything. And we need to look at it like a season and in phases. And like just on the topic of like decluttering your house, you don't do it all at once. If you try to do it all at once, oh my gosh, like you'll get burnt out, and then you'll feel really bad about yourself because you had these great intentions and then it didn't work. And it took me a really long time to declutter my house, and I'm still working on it. I'm not done, but I have to give myself grace and realize it's okay. And I think that's a hard thing to do sometimes, because you want it so bad. You want to accomplish that and have that good feeling so badly. But if we take it in bite-sized chunks of being a good steward in this, being a good steward in that, or doing something adding something to the schedule. Like for me, it was like making my bed in the mornings, and that was like a 2-minute thing. I originally thought that would take like 20 minutes. It only took 2. So what other things have I assumed I don't have time for that I really do have time for? Let's see what's possible. Let's set a timer. How long does it take me to do the dishes? It took under a minute. And I always thought, I don't have time to do the dishes before I go to bed. I think in that root of procrastination, there's also a lingering element of fear, because there's also this thing attached to it of fear of failure. And, I feel like what I was doing is I would procrastinate because I was afraid I would fail at something, or I would want to, like, for example, I'll just go back to the bed again. I felt like, okay, I want to do this 62-day challenge for myself. What if I don't make it day 2, day 50? I'm going to feel really bad about myself if I don't, because I want to. And so I think that's a thing that's kind of accompanied with procrastination is fear, but it's hiding behind procrastination. And another thing, doing the dishes, I would just add little things to my routine. Okay, I just create this expectation for myself. Okay, I like to wake up and have a clean living room. I like the pillows to be fluffed.
Yes.
I wasn't even like that before, but I just that was like a self-discovery thing, is like, I discovered when I wake up in the morning and I walk into my living room, I enjoy, it's like a pleasure to myself, like self-care, to see everything tidy and to see the blankets folded and put, the throw blankets folded, or the pillows fluffed, or the floor clean. So little things like that. And so it's like, okay, so if I go to bed and I leave the living room in a condition where it's not gonna promote joy for me the next day, that's my own thing. Like, that's on me. I can't get upset at somebody else. That's on me. I have this, I know I have this discovery about myself. I enjoy it one way. If it's not that way, okay, it's myself getting in the way. So what do I have to sacrifice to give myself this joy the next morning? Okay, well, I have to sacrifice. I need to put the dishes, make sure that the sink is empty inside, and start the dishwasher at night, or put it on a timer so that the kitchen's clean and it feels good when I go in there to make my coffee. Yes. Or tidy the couch, make it look pretty, so that when I walk in, it makes me like take a sigh of like, oh, that's nice. And just gifting those little things for yourself, I think is important for self-care, for showing yourself value. And it also, every time you add something that you're consistent on, for me, I discovered it's like every time I add something like that and I do it and I continue to do it and then I add more, it kind of builds up my confidence. Like, wow, I thought I could never accomplish this, or I thought I could never maintain this, and I have, and more, stronger than I think. Whoa. And it builds up my confidence. And I think that's another reason why, but with procrastination, there's fear that hides behind that, because the fear of failure. And this is why I think why fear is hiding behind that is because when we're consistent with stuff, and when it builds up our confidence, and what are two things that go together that is like trust in God and confidence in yourself, confidence in God. And I think when you pair trust with confidence, like it's like a power team or something. I think it's something so important. And so, procrastination is it seems like a little thing, but there really is fear behind it. And it's just kind of a self-destructing type thing that I think all of us
I agree. I would also add to that there's a fear of success as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the reason why I say that is because Throughout all this, I've had to launch my businesses, and I have two. And one of them is global. The other one is on track to be. I had to go to another level of divorcing myself again. And one of the things is, I'm not really one of those people that likes to be seen in public. I like to kind of, I have a very quiet life, but I know a lot of people. But at this point, because of what the path that God wants me on, period, because it's very clear, I have to come out of my so-called shell. So being shy at 40 doesn't exist. Well, I don't have time to be 40 and fearful. I don't have time to be going to another level and have more fear of myself than anything that I could be stepping into. So it gets to the point where I'm going to do it afraid. Just going to go towards the lions, like I said before. I'm going to go towards what I fear because I want to get over it, because I know there's something on the other side of it. Oh, that was meant to keep me away from where I originally was supposed to go. So let's get to it. Let's see what's behind it. But, when God says go boldly before the throne, he's really meaning that in every aspect of life. But you go boldly when you have the information, you have the support behind you, you have everything you need. Since God said he supplies all of our needs according to his riches and glory, why am I not going further than where I've been? And I've been on the receiving end of looking at somebody's face and looking at how disappointed they were in me for not being able to perform. And I'm like, I'm not disappointing myself and nobody else anymore. I'm going to value other people's time. I'm going to make effort. There was all these me statements that needed to come into correction. So it wasn't, again, correcting other people. It was correcting me so that I could function. Because Android and the Apple don't use the same operating system. I wasn't using God's operating system, but expecting to be able to get the same type of features like Safari or, something that's specific to Apple or something that's specific to Android. I'm asking an Android for something that Apple does. I'm asking Apple for something that is exclusive to an Android. There's only one way or the other. And because I was on the wrong operating system, you get the wrong results. You get the wrong answers. You get the wrong, just life, period. And not even trying to. But being able to surrender self means you surrender your pride and who you are.
Yeah.
You go strictly and boldly after who God says you are. And you use his affirmation to move forward boldly because you got everything that you need. You might not have all the answers like we just discussed, but what you know is you got everything you need.
You've been listening to Caffeinated Inspiration, brought to you by Studio Beanhead. Now, I just want to thank you guys for listening to this podcast. I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to just spend this time with me. And I hope and pray that you have a blessed day and that you've enjoyed this time with me over a nice cup of coffee or whatever your beverage of choice is. I appreciate you. I really do.